So, what we're looking at is sharpening our neuroception. Neuroception is our perception of safety and threat. As we're looking at this, that's kind of the underlying theme of this several weeks is how do we perceive, what are we perceiving as dangerous or safe? When we think about driving, unless you're in a New York City or something where you have really great public transit, driving is something that's really necessary. We get around by driving. If we can't drive, we feel sometimes shame when we are 16 years old or different ages, depending on where you are. It's a symbol of adulthood and freedom. We have a lot of different experiences with it. And we tend to feel embarrassed if we're having a lot of anxiety around driving. And we feel perhaps like we need to be taken care of. We need to ask somebody else to drive us somewhere. And shaming always makes anything worse. And certainly it makes anxiety worse. So we're going to look at a bunch of different elements of this as we move through. One of the major principles of what we're working with around the nervous system is our overall level of nervous system alarm. And people who I talked to about this, especially this last week, as I've been talking with people about the blog post that I wrote, are saying, it's a lot worse for me now than it was since COVID started. And the major point that I want to make here is that whenever our nervous system is alarmed, if our alarm level goes up, then everything manifests differently. We might have more trouble sleeping. We might have more trouble driving. So when we had these very strong messages of stay at home, you're safer at home. Don't leave your home unless you have to go get groceries or something. If you do leave your home, don't be around other people because they might have COVID and they might spread it to you. So we have all of these specific messages around it's not safe since COVID. And then we also have all of the fallout of that. So you might be someone who's had COVID and you're experiencing ongoing health difficulties. You might have lost someone to COVID. You might be feeling a lot of financial anxiety around what's happening now with the inflation as it's really eating into our ability to have housing security, food security. So the overall level of anxiety when that rises, it increases specific anxieties as well, like driving. So the remedy for that is to build resilience or rebuild resilience and strength in our nervous system. And that's good because there's a lot of different ways that we can do that. One of them is cyclic sighing. That's a deep double inhale and a long, slow exhale through the mouth, like we're breathing out through a thin straw. We can do tapping on our forehead. We can hold our own hands. We can tune into our feet, our seat. All of these nervous system regulating practices are very available now. A lot of them have been researched, proven to be effective. And then there's a lot of things that make sense too, like getting out and getting into the fresh air, exercise, sleep, challenging catastrophic thinking, seeing friends, relaxation and guided practices. Those are proven to be helpful to reduce the overall level of hypervigilance in our nervous system. And then that will also help with anxiety around driving. And another part of this is to become familiar with the energy and sensations in our body. And one of the reasons why that's helpful is that then we get kind of an early warning if we're starting to get into a dysregulated state. So that's really important when we're working with hypervigilance, is that we can start to see when it's going from appropriately vigilant into something that's stronger. And when we get into that dysregulation or the hypervigilance, it doesn't make sense. Our neuroception is not accurate anymore. Another element of this is that we have direct experiences around driving, and then we have indirect experience that our brain applies to driving. So if you've been in a car accident, you have the direct experience. Your nervous system remembers that. Especially if you were in an accident that was something you didn't see coming, then it takes a while for the nervous system to regulate down to, well, that doesn't normally happen when I drive. And we might be a little bit more vigilant around it. If it happens in a really serious way, where there was injury or death, or where there was something that happened multiple times, then it's harder for the nervous system to remember that almost all the time when we drive, almost all the time, there's no danger there. There's no accidents that happen. And then if you've been hurt in other ways, Like when I was recovering from PTSD after being assaulted while I was riding my bicycle, I had an elevated sense of anxiety around driving for 3 or 4 months as I was healing that. The injury that had happened to me did not happen in the car, but I had had direct experience that someone could hurt me. And then my brain applied that to other situations. So the level of threat goes up, and then we start really seeing danger everywhere. And the level of threat goes down as I was healing and I was starting to recover from it. And then I didn't have the anxiety around driving anymore. So that's the way our nervous system works. It really looks at what's dangerous, what could possibly hurt us. It elevates that into our awareness. The neuroception, the perception of danger, is highly affected by all of the things that could go wrong. So we have this predictive brain that's always on the lookout for danger. And the grounding and orienting practices that we do help us to regulate, and it brings that level down. So it helps us to deal with all kinds of anxiety and fear, including panic attacks. So if you've ever had a panic attack, then you know that it could happen again, and your brain will apply that to different situations. So it feels like we're out of control. And one of the things that's very helpful to know about panic attacks is that we can actually bring our system back into regulation by using these tools. One of the ways we do that is we intervene early, we see what's happening, and we start right away to use the tools to regulate, like cyclic sighing or tapping or all of the other tools. I've worked with people who've had panic attacks as the flight is getting ready to take off on an airplane. And they're afraid of the flying, but they're also afraid of having another panic attack. So this is something that could be underlying, whether it's elevated to the level that it's a panic attack or whether it's a little bit less intense. That's something that is also in our awareness. Before we go into the walkthrough, which is the main part of the inquiry, I wanted to just briefly bring in a couple of tools that we can work with. So when you have thoughts, and so what we're going to be working with is visuals. So put the visuals, keep your eyes open as you're doing this, and imagine that you put the image into a frame on the other side of the room and that there's space around the frame. So in the middle is the image, then there's the frame, and then there's all the space on the outside of the room. And then take your eyes around the empty space a couple of times in each direction. That's one of the framing and tracing is one of the major tools that's very helpful for us to look at images. We can also tap on the forehead, shift our focus. There's a couple of other tools we can do there. The bilateral brain stimulation seems to really help us to know that's an image I'm looking at. It's actually not what happened. And so right now that's an image of a car on a bridge. But actually I'm not sitting in a car on a bridge, neither are you. So we're here looking at this and recognizing that that's an image. The other thing that makes images feel a lot more true is when we feel sensation and energy in our body. So there's a couple of things that we do for that. And I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because I know a lot of people are already familiar with this. But anyone who's not, I just want to familiarize you with it a little bit before we go into it. So one of the ways that we can work with sensations is to notice that there's a location and notice that it doesn't take up the whole world. So if you have a feeling of tension in your stomach, for instance, you might not notice it up into your chest, or it might go into your chest. It might kind of push at the edges of your body. It might just be really tight. And then we can describe it. We can kind of look like a scientist. Like, is it moving? Is it still? Does it have a temperature? If it's painful, what kind of pain sensations? So this helps us to take a step back. Just like on opening our eyes and looking at an image on the wall, we're taking a step back and noticing the energy. And then the other way to work with energy is to notice the space on the outside of the energy. So instead of putting our attention into the energy, bring your attention to the space where that energy isn't. And then we can do those other things. Hold your own hands, open your eyes. So staying grounded in the present moment is the key to accurate neuroception and to be able to reduce the level of anxiety. Because we're going to be anxious if our nervous system is saying, red alert, red alert. And so we have to bring ourselves back into a more realistic view of what the actual danger is. Anxious thoughts about driving. So these are some of the thoughts we might have. You might have most of them. You might have one of them. They might not apply to you at all. I don't trust people to pay attention and drive safely. The thing about these thoughts is that any of them could be true. And that makes it harder for us to say, well, what do you mean I shouldn't be anxious while I'm driving? Somebody might be drunk or somebody might fall asleep or texting or something. So we're not saying that these things are not true, but we are putting it into a perspective of it's not usually true. And most people are alert, most people are driving safely. Sometimes we'll have a close call. Almost always it doesn't work out to be an accident. And so when we're looking at this, we're working with the thoughts. We can tap on the forehead, we can use those tools. And we're trying to assess the risk. So anytime we're around other people, especially when we're driving, there's a danger. And how much danger is there? So, what we're talking about when we're talking about anxiety around driving is what is the actual level of threat? What are the benefits of driving? How can I work with this in a way that's helpful and supportive and that makes my life work? When we get too much anxiety, it just feels like it's impossible. So we can look at a situation like a statement like that, I don't trust people to pay attention, and go, yeah, that's true. I don't know what's going on with the other drivers. But we also have the ability to look around, to assess things, to notice if someone's weaving, to notice what's going on around us. So we're not completely helpless around that. Sometimes we'll think about, I don't trust myself. That's quite common with anxiety around driving. And it's true that when we're not regulated, we're less alert, we're not as safe as we usually are. And that's one of the reasons why we could work with lowering the level of anxiety so that we are safer, that we can trust ourselves more. And to work with a belief like any of these beliefs, we can have a belief, some of it's from our own experiences, some of it's speculation that's caused by fear. Like if I'm in control of something like a car that could hurt somebody, I might turn the wheel into the other lane or hurt somebody. But that's a speculative thought. It's not true. So, what we're trying to do is sort through what are the thoughts that are more accurate than others? What is a fear induced thought? And how can I work with that and bring the level of anxiety down? So, hypervigilance in our nervous system makes everything feel like a red alert. And then we can come back, we can let ourselves regulate again. When we have a situation that's a little bit more dangerous, like driving over a bridge, for instance, we can look at that and go, well, it is dangerous. If something happened, I could fall over into the river and drown. And then we might have very vivid videos of that going in our mind. And in fact, that's not the situation. People drive over bridges all the time. Guardrails are very strong on the sides of bridges. But it's the fear, the mind is creating this image that seems really true. So we're going to work with some of those. Just now, before we go on, take a deep breath. Notice how you're feeling. Notice your feet and your seat. Notice your hands. You could hold your hands. Just notice what's happening. So we're going to do this slow motion run through. One of the things that does is that it helps us to see what parts of this experience are hard for us, that make us anxious, and that we have the opportunity to use these grounding and orienting tools to come back into regulation. So if driving anxiety isn't something that's up for you, then you could pick something else and just kind of not pay so much attention to the words that we're looking at here. But if it's even a little bit of a concern, it might be helpful to go through the steps. So one of the first steps might be, I'm thinking about getting my car. So there could be a few preliminary steps. But you could also tune into that moment where you pick up your keys and you look outside. And there's your car. You know that you're about to go for a drive. And notice what's happening in your body, what's happening in your mind, your thoughts. So look at the images, look at the words. So you might see yourself in the image. It's helpful to take a step back. So instead of looking out of your own eyes as you're picking up your keys and looking outside, see yourself in the image with the keys in your hand, getting ready to go outside. You can see your car. And any one of these places, you can stop. and press pause. Take a while to look at this. So, right now, just a couple of deep breaths might be enough to go, okay, I'm feeling a little anxious. I'm taking a couple of longer exhales. I'm noticing my shoulders. I'm letting them release. And it feels like it's okay to move on to the next step. So, the next step might be when you're opening the car door and you're sitting in the driver's seat, you haven't turned the key in the ignition yet. You're just sitting there. Another step that you can take, and we'll take a minute for this one, notice cues of safety. So, you could lock your doors. Nobody can get into the car. You could look around and see if you notice anything that's alarming. Notice that your car is a familiar place for you, most likely. Just notice, what do you see through the windshield? And then look around as you're imagining it. You could even just look around, turn your head and look to the back, and turn the head and look to the back on the other side. And if you were in your car, what would you be seeing as you're doing that? So you might see whatever you carry around in your back seat, or you might see what normally you'd see out through your windows, the sides and the back. So you're visualizing that you're sitting in the driver's seat and you haven't turned the car on yet. What are you seeing? So look for cues of safety. The nervous system might be alarming us, and we're going, no, actually, what I'm seeing is nothing that's disturbing. Take a couple of deep breaths in. And as you're doing that, bring your shoulders up on the inhale. And then breathe out and let your shoulders release. Let them relax. Notice how you feel in your body. Adjust your position. Notice your feet, your seat. Notice what you feel like as you're just doing this step of the visualization. And then when you're starting to feel a little bit more regulated, we can move to the next step. So I put my keys in the engine, I start the car so we can hear the car, we can feel the vibration maybe. Take a few breaths, and then imagine that you're driving to the end of the street that you're on, and you're getting ready to turn onto a busier road. So again, let's pause. What are the images, the words? What is it that feels a little bit scary or that's making you feel a bit anxious? And it might be words like we looked at a minute ago. I'm scared that I'm going to hurt somebody, or I'm scared someone's going to be tailgating me or be aggressive, and then I'm not going to know what to do. So look at them. Take a few minutes for this. Put them in a frame. Keep your eyes open. So one of the things about anxiety, it helps to keep our eyes open. And if you were framing that image or those words into a frame, notice there's the space on the outside of the frame, and then there's the image or the words on the inside of the frame. Look at it like it's on the wall on the other side of the room, and then move your eyes around that a couple of times in each direction. So it might be a little bit alarming, super alarming. Just try that a few times. You could do some tapping on your forehead. Take your attention away from the image and into the sound and sensation on your forehead. You could take a few deeper breaths, long exhale. And let's stay with this for a little bit. Notice the sensation or energies in your body. How would you describe what you're feeling? Sometimes anxiety is generalized. Our whole body feels kind of edgy or restless. Sometimes it's more like I've got a fist in my gut. Notice in your own body, where is the energy and how would you describe the energy? Well, it's curling and it's like a hot wire, or it's just this cold lump. Notice what the energy feels like. If you have an image of the energy, you could put that up onto the frame again. Shift your focus, look at the image, and look at what all the other things on the wall. Bring your attention back to the image. You could take your eyes around the outside. So, whatever it is that you're experiencing, stay with it for a little bit longer. Notice that in your body, the sensations that are there, they might fill your whole body, but there are spaces around your body where the energy doesn't go across the room. Oftentimes, if energy is like a tightness in your stomach area, it doesn't go into your arms and legs, it doesn't go up into your chest, or maybe it does, but not into your head. So notice the space around the outside of the energy as well. And let's sit with this for a minute, just noticing the somatic experience, what's happening in your body, and then letting it come forward. What is it that you're anxious about? And let your body generate those thoughts. And as you get a thought, then use the framing and the tracing around the outside edges of it to work with that thought. What if I have a panic attack? I'm going to drive out into the busier traffic. What if I have a panic attack? So then we might start stiffening up and holding our breath. So let your breath release. Right now, you're not in a car. You're not going to hurt anybody. Long exhales. Breathe out through the mouth. And almost always, we can arrange it so that we could pull over to the side of the road. So if you're driving and you're starting to notice, I'm feeling pretty anxious here, I'm going to pull over. I'm going to turn over on that quiet side street. I'm just going to sit for a bit, maybe do some cyclic sighing. I'm going to notice again that I'm safe. I'll give myself the time that I need to settle again. Or maybe you have somebody with you. You've taken somebody with you, either in person or on a speakerphone, and you could allow them to help to keep you grounded and oriented. You're doing great. There's no danger here. Relax your shoulders. Just let yourself experience relaxing a little bit, reducing the experience of anxiety. And when you're starting to feel more settled, then you can move to the next step. It might be fear of coming up on bridges is quite common. It could be an aggressive driver. It could be just the heaviness of the traffic. There's a lot of cars, whatever it might be for you. And then bring that up so I can see the bridge up ahead. So again, we're not actually coming to a bridge. We're sitting doing a visualization. What are the cues of safety here? So are the guardrails all in place? Is there anything alarming about the bridge? Is there an accident on the bridge? Do you see somebody driving erratically? If so, you could let them go ahead of you and just slow down a bit. So we actually have quite a bit of control or agency in order to shift things a little bit if we notice something like that. Most of the time, though, when we see a bridge coming up, it's our own anxiety that's creating these what if scenarios. And again, tapping on the forehead, put it in a frame. Give yourself a moment to settle with this. What is the actual level of danger? Take a few deep breaths. Notice your feet, your seat. You could hold your own hand. Notice the warmth of your own hand. Couple of deep inhales, double inhales, long, slow exhales. That's cyclic sighing. As you're working with this visual, you might be tapping. Notice that you can, at the same time, you can regulate your nervous system. Let's pull back from that one now and go into visualizing positive outcomes. Let that settle, and you can always come back to this. I'm not at all suggesting that a 10-minute walkthrough is going to cure what can be fairly strong anxiety around driving, but just to give you a sense of, yeah, when I do that tracing, I actually feel like that image isn't as powerful anymore. So now what we're going to do is use the same predictive qualities, the visual qualities of the brain, and we're going to turn it towards more of a positive outcome. So put yourself in the picture. See yourself looking calm as you're driving the car, you're relaxed. Maybe you're listening to some music, you're breathing slowly, you're alert, and you're driving safely. So there's no danger here. Just see yourself under those ideal conditions. Not storming or icy, it's just a regular day. And as you approach heavier traffic or something that concerns you, just see yourself staying calm, alert, and then the traffic eases. And as you're approaching your destination, things are starting to slow down. You pull over and you stop, turn off the car, and take a moment here just to notice. Most of the time when I'm driving, there's no danger here. I arrive without being in an accident. I could regulate enough to stay calm and enjoy the drive. And maybe it's not your experience right now, but maybe it was in the past. And you can get back to that. You can rebuild that resilience again. And you get out of the car, you greet the friend you're going to see. Spending a little bit more time on this as well can be helpful because then your body doesn't know that what we vividly imagine isn't true. So all of the catastrophic thinking we've been doing around the driving, we can kind of overwrite some of that by doing some of this positive outcome. And in fact, it's more true that nothing harmful is going to happen. It's very unlikely that something harmful would happen. We could also just feel that in your body. So take a moment now, feel your feet, your seat. You made it safely. Let your shoulders relax. And see if you could offer some kindness to yourself. This is actually hard. Our nervous system has had a lot to deal with the last 3 years in particular, but all the time it does. It's hard being an adult. We have a lot of pressures on ourselves. Look around the room that you're in right now. Look at cues of safety. I'm actually okay. So oftentimes, our perception of threat is not accurate. To sum it up, our brain doesn't know the difference between what we vividly imagine and what is actually happening. So practice regulating and safely driving through visualization can help our nervous system to calm down. When you're working with this, drive with someone supportive. Take short trips that don't alarm you, go to places you enjoy, but gradually build the frequency and the difficulty of your drives. So for the first little while, don't go on a superhighway or on an interstate. Stay in a place that feels a little bit safer to you. And really use the grounding practices. These are really helpful. Go to my emergency practices on my website. Use these grounding practices before you get in the car. Relax your shoulders, do some breathing practices like longer exhaling while you're driving. When you pull up to a light, for instance, check in and see how you're doing. You could do some cyclic sighing, hold your own hands. And as you're driving, use your eyes to assess visually and practice being calm and alert. So when we drive and we feel well rested and well regulated, then we can try it out and see how it goes. And if it's too much, or if we need to take a few minutes to regulate while we're not driving, just pull over. Try it another time. Taking these small steps can give our nervous system and our body the experience of safety. And that experience of safety is really what overrides that skewed neuroception of a higher level of threat than what there actually is. Doing that will help to release this, and gradually you'll be able to drive more and feel more comfortable doing it.